I'm Emma, and I'm 42 years old. I've been married for 12 years and work as a pastry chef in a bakery. My mom was an amazing cook. Ever since I was little, I'd often hang out in the kitchen, watching her cook. She still talks about it to this day. Once I started elementary school, my mom began teaching me how to cook, and we'd bake sweets together on holidays. From that point on, baking became my hobby. I went to culinary school and was able to land a job at the bakery I had always admired. For over 20 years now, I've worked really hard. I love my job and plan to do it for the rest of my life. But being a pastry chef is physically demanding. It involves standing for long hours, from morning to night, and frequently handling heavy pots and pans. For the past 3 years, I've been having back issues, and recently, it's been getting worse. Standing up is painful, and there are days when I just have to take time off. I'm the chief pastry chef, and taking a day off puts a burden on my younger colleagues. Emma, don't push yourself. I'll take care of it. My junior colleagues are all wonderful people who catch on quickly, which is a great help. On the other hand, David is someone who doesn't show me any compassion despite my bad back.
Where's breakfast? You're making me late.
Even on days when I can't get up in the morning because my back is acting up, he doesn't show concern or offer help. He even comes all the way to bed to hurry me along for breakfast. Sorry, I can't get up because it hurts. Could you grab something for breakfast from the grocery store? When I ask him apologetically.
Ugh.
He sighed and left for work. I met my husband, David, back in my 20s. We frequented the same pub and started bumping into each other more and more, until he became someone I couldn't stop thinking about. One night, a little tipsy, I mentioned this to the bar owner, who then arranged for us to hang out. After sharing a few drinks together, we officially became a couple. David is 3 years older than me and works in insurance sales. When we first met, he was cool and incredibly gentlemanly. He listened to my endless worries without a hint of annoyance. While we were dating, he was incredibly thoughtful, always putting me first. But after getting married, I felt he became indifferent and cold towards me. More often than not. I think the reason is that I continued with my job as a pastry chef. When we got married, David had suggested I switch to a job with more flexible hours so I could spend more time at home. But I just couldn't give up the work I love. I tried my best to keep up with the household chores so it wouldn't seem like my job was to blame. I consistently handed David my half of the living expenses each month, just as we had agreed when we got married. However, there were inevitably busy times, like Christmas, when work consumed me, and I couldn't manage the house as well.
Are you okay with the house being this messy? You don't seem to be earning much, so is this job really worth all the trouble?
Back then, no matter how little I made or how busy I was, I found so much joy in my job that quitting was never an option. I want to continue because I love it. I've told you this multiple times. I would respond, my voice strong. Usually, I don't talk back to David, but when it comes to my job, I can't help but get defensive, even when I know it's not good for us. David hasn't even tried the cakes I've made since we got married. I've offered them to him after dinner a few times, but he's never shown any interest in eating them. One day, I was struggling with back pain and couldn't get out of bed. I had to call in sick for work and was trying to get up to go to the hospital when Grace, my mother-in-law, showed up. Oh, is David already off to work? He's always so responsible, up early in the morning. Emma, what are you doing still in your pajamas at this hour? My in-laws live about a 5-minute drive from our house. Grace usually goes walking a few times a week and has made it a habit to drop by our place. She typically comes around the time we're having breakfast. While I'm cleaning up, she and David have a pleasant chat before she leaves. Today, I couldn't make breakfast, and David left a bit earlier to stop by the grocery store, so I was alone. Grace, just like David, opposed my career, and she never misses a chance to bring up the fact that we haven't had children. Every time we meet, she reminds me we haven't had kids. So honestly, I'm not a fan of Grace. When David is around, he's the one talking to her, so I usually avoid conversation with Grace as much as possible. I took the day off from work because my back hurts. I'm planning on going to the hospital soon. Huh? We've been saying this for years, Emma. You clearly don't care about family. Can't even have kids. You're really a hopeless case. I wanted her to leave, but my back hurt too much to even argue. I had no choice but to fake a smile. Grace used to work part-time at a dry cleaner's a few years back. David often tells me, "My mom worked and still managed to take care of the house perfectly. She was the ideal mom. I wish you'd take a page out of her book." Each time they say these things, their critical words cut deep. I can't help but feel hurt. While it's not really a fair comparison, part-time and full-time work demand totally different hours. From David's perspective, what Grace does is just normal. Even on days when I come home, utterly exhausted from work, I do my best with the household chores, but it seems like it never gets through to them. David is one of 3 siblings. Their family of 5 was always lively. David probably yearned for a family like that, and I think Grace also wanted to dote on grandchildren. It's not that I didn't want children. For several years while working, I underwent fertility treatments, but we never managed to have a child. However, Grace blames it all on my job. "Since David's not here, and being around Emma just irritates me, I'm going home," Grace declared and left. Feeling equally irritated, I kept my mouth shut and simply said, "All right, see you later," as I showed Grace out. She was only here for about 10 minutes, but between my aching back and her presence, I felt drained. Later, I went to the hospital for my back and was told it was in bad shape. Looks like I'll have to keep coming in for treatments. At this point, continuing with my current job seems challenging. I can't keep being a burden on my company, but in some ways or another, I want to continue working with sweets. I talked it over with some people around me. Of course, I knew discussing it with David wouldn't lead anywhere, so I said nothing to him. A few days later, I announced that I would be leaving the bakery where I've worked for many years. My colleagues were shocked and told me they didn't want me to go. I was touched that they wanted me to stay, and since I also loved my job, tears started to flow. I explained that I couldn't keep burdening them, and that I had future plans I wanted to pursue. For the remaining month before my resignation, I promised to work as hard as I could, while also watching my back condition. And indeed, I worked harder than ever during that month. There were days my back hurt, but I motivated myself and gave it my all. Every day confirmed just how much I loved this job. I ended up crying more than anyone expected at both my farewell party and on my last day. I went home with a bouquet and a collection of messages and told David that I had quit my job. "I've quit my job," I said. Upon hearing this, David looked shocked. "What? Why'd you quit? And why didn't you tell me?" David had always wished I'd quit this job and was generally indifferent. I didn't think he'd really listen, even if I did consult him. "I think you know my back's been bad, so standing working is getting tough. You've been saying you want me to quit, right? For now, I'm planning to focus on treating my back and taking care of the house." "I said it might be good to change jobs, but I never said you should quit. How are we going to handle living expenses?" "We have some savings, so we'll pay from there." "Humph. Well,
If you can pay for it, fine. I'm going to bed,"
David said and went off to sleep. No words of concern for my back, nor any encouragement for the work I've been doing all these years. I felt anger swell inside me. The next day was David's day off. As I was making breakfast, Grace walked in.
"Emma, you quit your job,"
Grace blurted out as soon as she entered the house, surprised that David had informed her. But since it was true, "Yes, that's correct," I responded.
"So you're unemployed now. As if you weren't useless enough, now you're even more useless."
"I'm just focusing on my treatment for now. Calling me useless is rude," I fired back, wondering why she had to be so harsh. Hearing our voices, David woke up as well.
"Man, it's noisy this morning. You're jobless. Don't talk back."
Fuming at David's words, I retorted, "Why do I have to be talked to like that? I'm just not working right now." David wasn't backing down either.
"The problem is that you're not working right now. Normally, you secure another job before quitting your current one."
"I've told you my back is bad. How many times do I have to say it?" At this point, Grace chimed in.
"It's your own fault your back is bad, Emma, with no income, should leave." "Exactly. Like Mom said, give us your severance pay as compensation."
I realized talking to them was pointless. "Fine, then let's call it a divorce," I said. Throwing the half-finished breakfast into the trash, I grabbed the bare essentials and walked out of the house. Even as I was packing, David and Grace were still saying something, but I ignored them. Why did I have to be berated so much just for quitting my job? I had given all to both my work and my family. They never even showed concern when my back went bad. When did things go so wrong? As I walked, my tears wouldn't stop. Since my parents' house was far away, I called my best friend Sophia, a former coworker, and arranged to stay at her place for a few days. "Sorry for dropping in on you like this." "Don't cry. You've done nothing wrong. Feel free to vent about David and Grace as much as you want today." Sophia comforted me. That day, just like before when we were married, Sophia and I spent the afternoon talking, while sipping drinks. What baffled me the most during our conversation was why David and Grace had attacked me so vehemently for quitting my job. Sophia also said she couldn't understand it. No matter how much I thought about it, it made no sense. But I figured once we divorce, we'll be strangers. So I decided to expedite the divorce process and start anew. Later, when I went to give David the divorce papers,
"Are you going to give me your severance pay as compensation?"
he annoyingly pressed. I thought it was absurd that I, the one who had suffered, should pay compensation, but I was sick of dragging the conversation on any longer. "Fine, take it. Severance pay is a small price to pay." I handed over the severance pay at a later date. When I went to deliver the money, Grace was there. She immediately checked the contents of the envelope I handed over.
"Worked all those years and that's all the severance you got? You were useless until the end,"
Grace complained. It left a bad taste in my mouth, but on the flip side, I felt relieved not to be part of that family anymore. My divorce was finalized, and I became single again. I rented a small apartment and started my new life. After spending 2 peaceful weeks, even my persistent back pain seemed to vanish. I'm excited because my preparations for a new job start tomorrow. I can't wait. As I was getting ready for an early night, anticipating tomorrow, my phone rang. It was David.
"Hey, Emma, I'm really sorry. Can we start over?"
His voice sounded like a completely different person from when we divorced. It was incredulous. "Don't be ridiculous. There's no way we're starting over," I said, full of vigor. Then from the other side of the line,
"Say that again,"
Grace's voice chimed in. "Grace, I know you're listening. I have zero intention of starting over. Goodbye. I curtly ended the call. It did pique my curiosity a bit, how the attitudes of these two, who had said such horrible things to me, had changed. But I have work starting tomorrow. I pushed those thoughts aside and decided to get some sleep. And the next day when I went to my job, David and Grace were there.
I'm truly sorry,
David apologized. Confused about what was happening, I was standing there bewildered when George, my father-in-law, appeared.
Emma, I'm sorry that you had to find out like this.
It turns out George's company is opening a new bakery, and I was tasked with developing the shop and products from scratch. I had heard about this when I was contemplating quitting my previous job and consulted George. Grace and David had always been hostile towards me, but George had been on my side since the day we got married. He always supported my work and genuinely enjoyed the cakes I made. Whenever I had concerns, I didn't turn to David or Grace, but to George. 2 weeks after our divorce was finalized, David moved out of the house we lived in together and went back to his parents' home. That's when I got the call.
What's up with Emma?
George asked, puzzled.
Oh, she's useless. That's why we got divorced.
David responded, to which Grace gleefully added,
Divorcing unemployment Emma was the right choice.
Upon hearing this, George's face turned to one of surprise and anger.
You two don't know a damn thing. I've asked Emma to lead our new business venture. What do you mean useless? What do you mean unemployed?
George's answer apparently didn't subside for a while. That's why he came to apologize to me today. I tried to tell David and Grace about working with George, but they wouldn't listen. I thought George knew about the divorce. I'm sorry I didn't inform you about the divorce, George. Regardless, I'll give it my all to make the bakery a popular spot, I assured George.
No need to apologize. You don't have to forgive these two. With your talent, Emma, making it a popular place is a sure thing.
We shook hands. Grace and David looked regretful as they witnessed this. I won't forget what you both said to me that day, I told them. But all they could say was, Sorry.
Sorry. All right, Emma, let's talk about the new shop. You two can go home now.
George said. He sent David and Grace away, and we began our meeting. Starting a store from scratch is a new experience for me. Just having this planning session got me really excited. I later found out from George that David and Grace had begun investing a year before our divorce and had accrued a considerable debt due to failures. I had left money management to David. He used the living expenses I provided for our day-to-day life, while he used his own salary for new investments and debt repayment. It seems they were scared that if I stopped working and couldn't provide for living expenses, and if I stayed home, I'd discover the investments. So they must have really wanted my severance pay. I think David moved back to his parents' house to minimize the use of living expenses. George told them to quit investing and focus solely on paying off their debt. Until the debt is paid off, George decided to live separately to not spoil them. David took up a part-time job in addition to his usual work, while Grace started working full-time. Later on, George returned the severance pay I had given him.
I've been so busy with work that I couldn't notice what was going on. If they said they needed money for living expenses, I just gave it to them without questioning. Maybe I've been too indulgent,
George said, looking regretful. No, I was the same. I was so engrossed in my work that I didn't notice anything. I'm really glad I caught on this time, I told George. After that, George and I hustled to get the store ready for opening. Everything was new to us, and there were moments of anxiety. But through countless meetings and product planning sessions, we persevered. It took longer than we'd imagined, but we managed to create a store with an interior and products we're proud of. Then came opening day. George and I stood at the front of the store. Sales are booming. Seeing customers leave with sparkling eyes and cakes in their hands fills me with indescribable joy.